It's called coffee. He was stirring, rotating a teaspoon in a cup filled with liquid somewhere between the colours brown and black. When he was sure the granules had dissolved, he walked over to the kitchen table and placed the cup in front of her. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. She began to drink. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They definitely didn't touch. It wasn't always like this. Drinking coffee was something they used to do together. Every Friday they'd have meta mocha nights. They'd puff on cigarettes and drink milky, chocolatey, sugary coffee, premium coffee, whilst listening to Otis Redding's Cigarettes and Coffee on repeat, whilst watching muted clips on metacafe.com that had been tagged with the word cigarette or coffee. One night he suggested they take it even further and only speak in metaphors. She shot him a look that said, "Why? Why do I love you?" Quickly followed by one that affirmed that she did. But they laughed a lot that night. That was one of the nights they laughed the most. He gave up smoking when he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Fearing the loss of a camaraderie only shared between smokers, she quickly put forward the possibility that his cancer and the cigarettes were unrelated. I mean, sure, he often talked like a dick, but it didn't mean that he could inhale into his genitalia. Oh, well, that wasn't funny. And in her attempt to make things better, she said too much, that not only was he right, but that she would quit smoking too. They didn't laugh at all that night. The chemotherapy left him fatigued, but more than that, it made him nauseous. Smells and tastes he loved his whole life became enemies to his senses, and coffee was unkind to him. Not as unkind as Gorgonzola, but it was a close second. During the months of chemo, when he made a cup of coffee, he had to hold his breath, had to continue to hold his breath until she finished drinking it. When she asked why he was no longer drinking with her, he couldn't tell her the truth. He couldn't tell her that when she kissed him goodnight with the taste of stale Arabica beans in her mouth, it took everything in his power not to retch. He couldn't tell her because those kisses had become their only moments of intimacy. So he said he'd given up the coffee because of the caffeine and all the side effects. It was bad for you, bad for your mind and your body. It took weeks to leave your system. She nodded, said she understood, and she clutched her cup of coffee even tighter. He held on to his role of barista over the following year, but things changed. Friday night coffee became every night coffee. Milky, chocolatey, sugary mocha became black. No sugar. Premium coffee became any coffee. He'd even bought her some of that no-frill supermarket branded coffee. You know, the kind that came in packaging that seemed to scream, "You only buy this if you are really, really, really poor." He hoped she'd spit it out in disgust. But when she got to the bottom of her cup and didn't say a word, it was clear she hadn't noticed or cared. It was the same when he began to go to bed before her, without her. Alone. So tonight he was stirring. He suffered through the silence at the kitchen table and he waited. This was the longest it had ever taken her to drink a cup of coffee, but he waited. Tonight she was intent on savouring every mouthful, but he waited. And when she finally finished, he reached out his hand like an olive branch, like a rope you throw out to somebody when they're on the edge, and he asked her to come to bed with him. She said, she fancied another cup. What was wrong? What was wrong? He knew when it had started, but he'd recovered now. He was in remission. He was in remission, and now her heart was remiss, and that cup, that fucking cup of coffee, it was destroying them. It was the reason. No. It was the excuse. What was wrong? The caffeine. It was a drug. Remember? It was a drug, and she'd obviously become an addict. a victim of all those terrible side effects. She honestly did have a lot of headaches. And she was irritable all the time, so she didn't like to be touched. And she hadn't told him this, but she was even experiencing panic attacks now. Every night, after her last sip of coffee, the sight of the empty cup threw her heart into an irregular thump, and she had to sit and take deep breaths for 10 minutes before she could even contemplate the thought of joining him upstairs. And something was wrong. It was the caffeine. He stood up, walked over to the cupboard, grabbed the coffee jar off the shelf, walked back to the table and placed it beside her empty cup. It was the coffee he'd given her that evening. It was the coffee he'd been giving her for 3 months. It was decaf. Thank you.